Okay, welcome everyone. We are just waiting for additional attendees. Welcome Marianne from North Carolina. And wherever you're calling from, you are all welcome. This is a virtual remote space, and I am delighted that you were able to make it this afternoon. So let's, Michael Valentine from Colorado. Yes, we get the full geography covered here. All right, okay. All right, thank you so much. From Queens, New York, our Lisa, delighted that you're joining us. And yes, so anyway, why don't we get started? It's a nice afternoon and everyone on this call knows who I am. So I'm not going to do much of an introduction to myself, but I do want to say that this is the final in a series of book launches that most of you have heard about or attended. We had a very productive year, and I am specifically delighted to be inviting our recent graduate, Edafe Okporo, from our Master's in Human Resource Management and Development. And Edafe, I think you graduated in December, right? But you still walked this this time around and in May, right? And did the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. I saw the pictures on LinkedIn. And by the way, I do want to encourage everyone to connect with Edafe on LinkedIn as well, because he's got quite a, impressive coverage of his book launch. And we are absolutely delighted to have him back in the department as a proud alumnus of our program, but also a man with a very, very impressive biography. And it's not really about the past. I think, Edafe, we are all thinking about the impact you're making now and the impact you can make going forward, especially in this country. It took you all the way to come here, and we really need you and your message at this time in history. Edafe, you are going to tell us more about yourself and your mission, but I just wanted to make another exclamation mark here for the timing of this launch. It is at the time of the Pride Month, as well as the month of refugees, right? So it's a coinciding two very important themes that run through your biography and run through the work you are doing now. So on this note, I just want to give you a chance to tell us more about what, got you where you are. And we will start with your story. I will be projecting the slides, and tell us a little bit of the background, and we'll take it from there. And then we're going to have a conversation with everyone on this call, and you'll be answering, I'm sure, a lot of really involved questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ann, and so many people who have written in the chat. This is an opportunity that I have to be a lecturer, and my lecturer might be a student, and some of my classmates. I feel like the writing of this book was really the arc of my life at NYU, because I saw the book in my first semester at NYU, and I finished writing the book in my last semester at NYU. So it began in NYU and ended also in NYU. I want to start this conversation not about the book specifically, but about the conversations that led to the book. I think that is a learning moment for so many people who think they understand some of these issues that have to do with, like, migration, for example. When Ukraine happened, a lot of people were confounded, like, what do we do? How do we go about helping Ukrainian refugees? When Afghan happened, so it always happens, and there's a conversation between internally displaced people, undocumented immigrants, and so many broad conversation that I want to narrow it down to 2 specific issues and discuss those issues, and we will have a conversation at the end of the presentation. So can you go to the next slide, please? I like to use this photo as an example for one specific reason, is that people tend to conflict the tendency for refugees and migrants, quote unquote. A migrant is like someone who moves to another country for the reason of bettering their life. Refugees do that also, but it's for a different purpose. And I will use the definition that was written by UNHCR in 1951 after World War II, that became the language that is used for protection of displaced people. It says, refugees are people who cannot return to their country of origin because of a well-founded fear of persecution from conflict, violence, or other circumstances that have seriously disturb the public order and who, as a result, require international protection. The reason why I read this statement is that I came here as a refugee, but I didn't come because of the major reasons that refugees flee, which is nationality, religion, race, or political reasons. I came to the US because I'm a member of a particular social group. And it's very confusing because members of a particular social group do qualify for a refugee status, just like the Nelson Mandela family of South Africa. If they are being persecuted, they could seek refugee status in another country. But LGBTQ identified persons who are living in countries where they could be persecuted also qualify for this level of protection. And some people have asked me, why do LGBTQ people have to seek refugee status? And I just like to give a preamble that in 69 plus countries across the world, it's still illegal to be gay. And in 9 of them, you could face the death penalty. So because there are laws on the books that criminalizes these people, they end up having to flee to another country to seek protection. But I myself, my experience was similar to this image we see right here. I think is an experience that has to do with accessibility. I had a US visa and has to do with financial sustainability. I have the economics to be able to buy a flight ticket to come to the US. In 2016, I was a victim of mob violence in my home country and I had to flee. So many people cannot be able to afford to do this. So the next slide, which we're going to take a look at, will explain a little bit on this level of assessing refugee status. There's no major difference between an asylum seeker and a refugee. They are both the same status. But the only major difference is that a refugee goes to a refugee camp and gets a documentation that allows them to flee to another country. But for an asylum seeker, they get to the border of the country in which they want to seek protection from and ask for protection. So I happen to be an asylum seeker. I bought a flight ticket to New York in 2016. And when I got to the airport, I declared for asylum as a member of a particular social group. And the question we always get as regards to asylum seekers is that, why do people come to our border to seek protection? Why don't they do it in their own country? And asylum is an international protection, the same rights that refugees have, the same right asylum seekers have. Anyone fleeing persecution, conflicts, or human rights abuses has the right to seek protection in another country. So the question of like these people who come to the border to seek protection are quote unquote illegal is not founded in any legal test or document. According to international protection law, anyone fleeing persecution can go to the border of one of the countries that signed the 1951 Refugee Treaty to protect displaced people and ask for protection. Next slide, please. So this is like a game I like to play that helps us understand the process of seeking protection in another country. There are two types of asylum seekers. We have the affirmative and defensive asylum seekers. I was a defensive asylum seeker. So when I came to the US border in 2016 and asked for protection, I used a doorbell there. It's just like an example, to ring the bell at the entrance of the country and say, hey, I'm here. I'm fleeing persecution. I want protection. Then we have the affirmative asylum seekers. So citizens of Ukraine who live in the United States, when the war began in Ukraine, discovered that they can no longer go back to their country. They could also seek asylum. So those are the affirmative asylum seekers. So I use like buy now. So there's trouble in their home country. Maybe if you're a student of NYU, for example, and you discover in 2019, Burma passed a law that we criminalizes same-sex people in same-sex relationship. So you can go to the Department of Homeland Security and ask for protection. All these are still categorized under the same refugee protection that was granted to displaced people in 1951. Next slide, please. But when you ask for asylum as a defensive asylum seeker, like me at the border, according to US law enshrined in our Constitution, you have to be detained at the border. So, in 2018, during the separation of mother and children, if you are an international student, you might not know this, but if you live in the United States, you know this. There was a lot of question that the Trump administration is bullying immigrants and using detention to separate family from children. But I just wanted to make an example of how long detention have existed in America. So in my book, I made a chronicle explanation from 1980 during the Ronald Reagan administration up to 2016 when I came in under the Obama administration, how detention has been used as a system to deter immigrants from coming into the border of our country. In the 1980s, the Reagan administration wanted to prevent the war on drugs on Cuban and Asian migrants coming to America. So they used detention to keep them there to verify their status or their criminal history before they are allowed to come into the country. But detention has over the years grown in America. The United States is the largest incarcerator of migrants in the world. And these detention centers are private prisons. So it's part of the prison industrial complex that use the experiences of migrants to profiteer from a system. And I was a victim of this system. When I arrived in the US in 2016, I was put on handcuffs and taken to a detention center in New Jersey. And in the 5 months and 14 days I stayed at the detention center, I was working for $1 a day. So the people who are kept in the detention center now become the people taking care of those detention centers. And one of the argument I was trying to make is that compared to other civilized countries who welcome asylum seekers, refugees, and displaced people, detention is kind of outdated because many people who are fleeing persecution sometimes are fleeing detention from their country or jail term. So for the US to welcome immigrants with detention center is an inhumane treatment for displaced people seeking protection in America. But also, I also made specific arguments on LGBTQ specific immigrants, that it is harder for us to be detained. For example, when I was at the detention center, a trans immigrant from Honduras, who is now a woman, was detained in a male detention center because from her country, she couldn't change a birth certificate from male to female because they don't have laws that protect trans people there. But in the United States, we claim to protect LGBTQ people. So if a trans person is kept in a male detention center and they have all features of a woman, that leads to higher chances of sexual abuse and other form of abuse that they could face. I am a cisgender. That means I am the same gender with the gender I was born with. I am straight passing. That means as a gay person, I could act as if I'm not gay and pass, but I am openly gay. So I told some people around the detention center that I am gay. They started using derogatory terms on me, like maricon. It's a Spanish Central American term, which is derogatory for gay people. So that also leads to a compounded mental health state for immigrants who come to America seeking protection. And I wanted to make a case for that. So in the book, I tried to make a case for that. The next slide, please. Don't worry, we're almost done with the slides. In the book, this is a quote that came directly from the book, said, "The streets of America greets you with no pot of gold," because there's an idea from external audience before coming to America on the reality of what America is. So, when I was growing up, people used to say that America is like next to heaven because the streets are so clean. It's like it's made of gold. So I wanted to capture what my experience was like because when I came to the airport, I was detained. When I was released from the detention center after almost 6 months, there was no form of like manual or instruction on go to a shelter, take a train card and go to a train station. I was just left on my own demise. So I became homeless, like sleeping on the train station, sleeping on the streets of Newark and the YMCA shelter. Although I do speak English and I had an education from my own country, but most immigrants face these horrendous challenges of language access barrier, homelessness, access to economic opportunity, and adaptability to a new country. The United Nations High Commission on Refugees says it takes averagely 17 years for a refugee to resettle in a new country. So many people look at me being in America for 5 years and a half. I now have a master's degree. I do have a good source of living. I live in Manhattan, and they want to use me as an example. But I am an anomaly in the statistics of people rebuilding their life in a new country, because sometimes you have to learn English first. And after learning English, your education from your own country might not be applicable in the new country. So you tend to look for financial opportunities. And if you are struggling with like economic opportunities, it is more difficult for you to access educational opportunities. So this makes it more difficult for people to be able to rebuild their lives in a new country. And I tried to make an argument for that. The next slide, please. And the argument I was trying to make is that it's very difficult to change systemic laws in America because in a 50-50 split Senate, it's visually almost impossible to do that. The last time they have a comprehensive immigration reform in America was in 1980, when the US passed the Asylum laws that grants people like me the access to be able to seek protection in America. So the main argument that made the book a manifesto, as well as a memoir of me telling my story, was bigger systemic change for how we treat displaced people. That's why at the beginning, I tried to make a distinction between migrants and refugees. So refugees are part of displaced population. as at 2016, 1 in every 97 people was not displaced. Now, 1 in every 97 people on earth is a displaced person. That means they have lost the entitlement to a nationality. They are either internally displaced, like people in Ukraine who move from one part of the country to another country. They are either asylum seekers or they are seeking temporary protected status in another country. So how do we treat people that had to flee their home because of circumstances beyond their control? So I also try to make an argument that people like me, I wouldn't flee my country if there wasn't a law that would persecute me. My life was in danger. There were posters of me on the wall saying that I should be brought down dead or alive. And how these homophobic laws in countries that do not also protect religious freedom lead more people to have to flee their home. The next slide, please. Then lastly, in the last chapter of the book, this quote kind of capture the main acts I wanted from people. It's like, what can we do as individuals? Because it's like a big system and there is like middle of the system and there's like direct impact we can make. And my journey has been captured by this quote is that home for me is not just where you feel safe and welcome only, but how you make it feel safe and welcoming for others. Because when I came to America, excuse me, I have to drink water. When I came to America, after I left the detention, I was homeless. But within the short span of time, I created the first shelter in New York City that provided access to housing for other displaced people. It was my work at the shelter that a lot of people got to know me. And, you know, I have to go back to base, to where I started from and what was the driving force of me doing that. Is that in the social sector of America, most organizations that provide social services are non-for-profit organizations. So they are IRC, HIAS, CAMBA, the UNHCR, they don't make profits. So the only profit they make is impacting the lives of people who come to a new country to rebuild their lives. And one of the antidotes I use as a story in the book was a shelter guest that stayed in my shelter. When he came to America, he was living in the New York City shelter system. That means every evening you will get to the shelter. The first people in the line will get a room. The rest people will be rotated around the city. And if you don't get a place, you can sleep in the train station. And that was what he did for a week. When he heard that we have a shelter, he came to stay in the shelter. While he was staying at the shelter, he lost his mother and he couldn't return back home because he was a refugee. And we wanted to do something for him. So I called volunteers who are Americans and said, let's organize a vigil for him. People brought flowers, people brought candles, we sang with him. And last year, he bought his first home. And I was just talking to him about his journey. And he told me that that very night that those Americans came to like be with him in the morning, the only thing he could think about was like, how can he be of service to the United States? So he trained to become an EMT. And during COVID, he was promoted from not just like a regular EMT to a supervisor. So he worked extra hours, saved money, and bought his first home. And he said that the driving force every day was that in Guyana, the emergency technicians could not come on time. So the mother died of stroke. So he wants other Americans not to go through that experience because they were there for him during his time of mourning. So it's that feeling of home that I think we can create for other displaced people in America. Even my experience at NYU is that I struggle with some of the stuff that happened during my time. I remember I lost my dad during one of my semesters at NYU. And I thought that I was going to even drop out because I was so overwhelmed with emotion. But I told some of my professors, I told some people at the school, and they were there to like support me during that very challenging time. And that idea made me feel like I was home in that community. And I think as a Black person, as a gay person, as a refugee, I think about the inclusiveness that makes me feel welcome in different places. And that is the bottom line of the entire book, is that when you read my story, when you get to see my experiences and the experiences of people coming here to seek protection, how can you now then take those stories and make it a safe and welcoming place for people coming here to seek protection? That's just the bottom line. Thank you. The last slide is a thank you slide.
All right, what a story, Edafe. Could we have everyone on the screen, since we have a very intimate audience here, a lot of your faculty members here, people who taught your classes. Edafe, Patty, can we have everyone on the screen so that we are in one room and we can have a close conversation with Edafe, or is it not possible to do, Heather?
I believe that we can allow that for attendees. 1 second.
Yeah, if we could join attendees. But in the meantime, Edafe, tell us a little bit about, so you got an incredible publisher, and now what is your experience of, talking about your book? Now you have a book to share, but what is your experience of people's reactions? Because I know I followed your story. You spoke at the United Nations, you spoke in DC, you spoke in my local library here. I was trying to make it there. And lots of people are listening to you talk now in the context of your book. What are you learning? What are you seeing that, gives you hope?
I came to the US, I didn't know like anybody at all. I've never been to the US. I struggled at the beginning with like being a visible face for a particular issue that is very stigmatizing. But I have learned that, in my own bubble, I fail to see the larger amount of people that are hungry to create change. I went to Atlanta, I went to Boston, DC and New York is like very civilized, and you don't feel like you will feel welcome in those places. But I was surprised in Atlanta, there were a lot of people that are like, oh, I know a gay Nigerian who's struggling with similar issues, and your story will relate to them. In Boston, I met people who were like, in our community, we're trying to create a more diverse and welcoming place, and issues like this are very important. It's just like the level of like acceptance that people have for this particular issue is baffling, and it's heartwarming to see it happen in real time.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hear people can't turn on their cameras. That's okay, because
everyone should have access now to turn their camera on, I believe. If they want to.
Yeah, if you want to, you can. But please feel free to jump in with your questions, comments, etc. And as you are all getting ready, I want to take advantage of me being here. Edafe, what's next? Now you have, you know, you have the platform, you have the credentials, you came to one of the most, you know, prestigious universities, you went through our program, which we're very honored that you have. How can you leverage all of this social capital that you've built? And you have a tremendous network right now, just through sheer drive of your personal, you know, motivation and personal sense of mission and desire to change things for the better, right? Where do you want to take it?
So I don't want to name drop, but like this period, I've been able to sit in rooms that I never expected I would be able to be in. Like I was part of the Pride ERG for Essential in assembling their Pride Month events, Endeavor, QBE, HSBC. I've worked with like big banks and corporations in like structuring messaging in DNI. And I've been approached by recruiters. I am taking it one step at a time. Currently, I don't have a full-time job, but I'm likely to secure a full-time job soon. I really feel like I'm an artist more than someone that fit into an organization structure. And I came to NYU not because I want to secure a job, but because I want to improve my skills. And I felt like in that environment of learning, I became more like conscious of the opportunities that are out there that I am unaware of. If I have the opportunity, I will do another professional development program again and again and again. I think it made me a better person. And for so doing, it makes my work better because I saw rooms for improvement. And I think that that is where I am right now, is that I didn't know if I hadn't taken a program at NYU, if I would have seen some of my weaknesses or if I would have seen areas of improvement. And I find it pretty fascinating that someone who grew up in the community I grew up in can one day grow up and have the opportunity to participate in a learning environment like NYU. It's an honor for me, and I'm just taking that pride right now and soaking it in to develop what we come next. Because a few years ago, I didn't know I was going to be writing this book. I was just willing to give back to society. And I think I am still at that point, strategizing and thinking, how well can I be of service to the society? And in return, it creates better economic opportunities for me too.
Of course, of course. And, you know, Heather, do we still have issues with people at least on?
Looks like folks can't share their video, but they are able to unmute and ask questions. So I've asked people to raise their hand in the chat if they want to ask a question, and we can call on them and they can propose them.
Excellent.
I do see a question in the chat that was put here.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah. Did you want to go ahead and read that?
Yeah, let me read it. What have been your greatest sources of joy since you've been here?
Oh my God, so many things. First of all, you know, I live close to Central Park West, and you can't live by Central Park and don't feel a sense of joy every morning when you walk into the park. It has beautiful scenery, lakes, and so many things. Also, I think that I try not to participate in the capitalist structure of America, which is something I try to steer away from. But I didn't have opportunity to have like social life growing up because everything was all about economic sustainability. So now I have the opportunity to have a social life as well as being economically sustainable. That gives me joy every morning when I wake up, knowing that I'm not going to think about where I'm going to get food to eat, or if I'm going to die from being a gay person, or access to healthcare services.
Fascinating. Yes.
Also, I just want to mention is that the freedom I have to express myself and not be reprimanded for it as a gay person living in America is not something I could have done in my own country.
Yeah. I think I had a question, a comment from Roy. Roy, did you have a comment?
Yeah, hi, Edafe, it was a very inspiring story. Thank you for sharing it. What I'm wondering is, what's the solution? It seems that politicians are like tough on immigration. That's how they win elections. And it doesn't sound like the Democrats are any better than the Republicans. So if I were to call my congressperson or senator, what should I ask of them?
Okay, so I think that is the second part of the question is contradictory to the first. I'm sorry. The politicians cannot make change. Can I call my senator or representative? So the change does not rely on them. When I was making a recommendation on the idea of home is not just where we feel safe and welcome, I think it's the smallest act of kindness we can contribute to making displaced people's life better in America. There's this story I was told by somebody. It was like he moved to Boise, Idaho from Syria, and it was speaking Arabic, couldn't speak English. And one day was trying to look for direction. So an American lady was riding a bike in Boise. So he stopped the lady and said, he was pointing his phone, and the lady saw it was a Google map. And she came down from my bike, rode a bike with him, and they walked to the place. When they got there, it was a Social Security office, and the guy got to Social Security and learned English because of how that lady was very kind and caring to him, leaving a responsibility for that day to help him that led to him having a job and a life in America. I always say that time is more valuable than money when it comes to refugee and displaced people issue. There's so many grassroots organizations that need support, and people who do have skills, I always ask them to contribute a little bit of their time to these social issues, because it's easy to say when something happened, they'll be like, donate to this is how to help, this is how to help. But when we're trying to rebuild our lives, the most important thing is those form of support and assistance we can get from people. Like there's an organization called Dress for Success. And when I came to America, I was trying to apply for a job. They gave me a suit to go for my first job interview. Even NYU, the international department, they have an English program for people who are from international countries living in the New York area who wants to improve their English language. I think you can even volunteer at the International Center to help international students who are displaced to create a sense of inclusivity and welcoming for those people. So that is what I always recommend, is that, in the last election in the United States, Biden got donation of $1.5 billion. So how many voters do we have in America registered? Less than 200 million. Cut out all the middlemen, divide 1.5 billion by 200 million people. Mathematically, it's like 22 million per person. So there's a lot of money in politics, but there's no money in helping people create sustainable life in America. So that's where I would say is that when people come here, how do we help them to be able to rebuild their lives rather than overly focusing on the system of how they get here? Because there are laws that protect people when they get here, kind of.
Thank you for that. I'll be sure to take your advice.
Very interesting. But I would say, Roy and Edafe, we need to do both. We definitely need to reach out and be helpful in whatever way we can, but also not to give up on the systemic change that needs to happen.
So I think I'm going to read the very last paragraph of my book. It speaks to that in a kind of way because I don't participate in the US political system because I'm not a US citizen yet. So it doesn't really matter to me that much in terms of like creating that form of change, but it matters to you more as someone who lives in America. It says, as an asylee, that's an asylum seeker who has been granted asylum, a refugee, I will never be the president of any country. Technically speaking, we don't even have citizenship of any country. That is why this book exists, to make you part of our country, to give you our stories so you can help us make policies and build new realities that will enable us to participate in the world with you. We are displaced due to man-made policies. We fled when home was no longer safe. We became destitute in a foreign land, and all we ask for return is your compassion, to see us for who we are, and to give us a genuine opportunity to build a new life of our own design. In the last few years, I've been asked, where are you from? I answer, Nigeria. And then people tell me, I am far away from home, but my response is always the same. This is home for me now, because home is not just where you feel safe and welcome. It's also about how you make it feel safe and welcoming for others. So the task to Americans is that, how do we create policies that we make people feel safe and welcome when they come here? That is what I have given to you to find the solution.
Wonderful. This is very, very profound. Marianne, you had a question.
Hi, let me try video. Look at that. And there we are. Edafe, it is so great to see your smiling face. I just want to say thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey in NYU. It was truly an honor and a privilege to have you in our class, and now as part of a proud alumni community. I am curious, kind of a follow-on question to Anna and Roy's around what's next. What I found interesting, after reading your book and all your inspirational stories and the courage and bravery you have demonstrated to stand up for what's right and to help other people, that you chose human resources for your degree, right? And so I'm curious, as you think about what's next for you, how do you see using your degree to further your message or further your work?
I think that, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be in the classes of so many people. But I think that human resource is like the engine to change in organization. One of the first classes I did, Introduction to Human Resources, one of the 9 characteristics of human resources is being a credible activist. And for you to be a credible activist is that people have to trust you. I think I have earned trust from a lot of people that I can be a thought leader in the DEI space that can enable systemic change in bringing people that don't traditionally look like the people that would be in those spaces to come into those spaces. I think I choose human resources naively thinking that it will only be about diversity and inclusion. Then when I came into human resources, I discovered that it's all about being an effective organization. And to be an effective person in society, I feel like organizations are countries on their own. And if a country can make a change, an organization as a country can make a change that affects society in a broader sense. Because if more refugees have more economic opportunities, we have more chances to rebuild our life. Luckily, while I was doing my master's degree, the Biden administration pushed me, and I worked with the Biden administration for 11 months, from August last year to May. And I was doing Afghan employment resettlement opportunities. I was able to travel to different US military bases. And when I was in the room, what I bring to the table is always how do we structure or design this program to capture the skills and experiences of these Afghans, and how do we explain it to the employers to make their CV more than just that resume, but to add the economic experience and cost they lost to be in this country. So I think that I was naive, but now I'm very grateful I choose human resources.
And that's a phenomenal message, Edafe, for, you know, after all, yes, or effective organizations, but inclusion, it seems like the foundational value that all of our efforts in change management, and my colleagues here, Todd and Marianne, know very well. And in our classes, doesn't matter what we teach, it should be kind of the running theme. And Michael Valentine, I want to call on you here, since we are, you know, redesigning our HRMD program with a lot more investment in diversity, inclusion, and other areas. So do you want to say a few words? And I don't think, Edafe, have you taken Michael Valentine's?
Oh yes, oh yes,
yeah.
we
All right. You've
Edafe,
got a lot of loyal faculty members here on the call.
First of all, I don't really want to take up airtime talking about the program, Edafe. You were so eloquent in really capturing the spirit of what we are trying to deliver through the HRMD degree. And I, you know, again, my congratulations, and feel so honored that you were a leader in our Managing Inclusion course. So you spoke a little bit about that. So I'm happy that you were part of that group of students who got the opportunity to hear your voice. I am a little bit curious, though. I do have a question with regards to your comment around organizations being kind of small countries and making change. And you might remember that one of the messages I try to convey in basically all of my courses is the responsibility that HR practitioners have around change, right? And being active, not only in the organization that they're a part of, but in the communities that those organizations are a part of as well. So I'm curious, as you think about your academic journey, your interaction with your classmates over the years, and what you would tell them, what you would tell HR, you know, students who are going through the program now about that responsibility relative to your experience and the broader global landscape, and, you know, what's happening globally. What would you say to your classmates now, but, you know, as an alum and having gone through that experience?
So I think it was Dr. Beverly's class that we talked about the credible activists. I think that, you know, it takes courage to be vocal about issues like this in the human resource department. And one of the arguments we had in some of our opening arguments in that class was like, if an issue like this come up, what do you do? If it has to do with external communication or internal communication, I think I can't really advise people, because things that have worked for me, I think I feel lucky sometimes, because being vocal and out about these issues can sometimes render you unemployable by most standards. And if you are not careful, if you can't toe the line of like respectability politics and shit sandwich in the workplace, you might be left to the back of the table and not have a space to come back in that room. So I think I would tell them that you have to be you and do what works for you, but also follow the principles that guide the organization. So if there are principles that guide the organization, that is the standard maybe for equitable workplace, or guiding principles that the organization came in to do together. If it doesn't fit into that guidelines, then you can take action. But if it's your personal decision-making, you have to do what works for you, in as far as it doesn't violate HR policy, ethics, or other laws that has to do with the organization. You are not bullying people to get your opinion across. Because, you know, I'm very opinionated, but I also know when to step back and allow my opinion not to affect the decision-making process. I was in DC yesterday, and we're doing a presentation like, can we protect religious freedom in the workplace and LGBTQ rights? And one of the opposing person in the panel is an outspoken Republican person, and he was talking about, they asked him a question like, why do you think LGBTQ rights progress? And the person was like, it's because every gay person has a gay auntie. I was so furious because for me, the answer is activists and HIV. And I couldn't voice my opinion because I wanted to be respectable in that environment. So that is the advice, is that you have to be yourself, follow the rules, be ethical, respect other people, but don't allow people not to allow you voice your opinion when you are given the opportunity to do so.
Thank you. Michael, any comments?
No, I mean, this is obviously a challenge. I love the idea of courage and knowing where to apply that courage. But yeah, I think you're right, Edafe. There's a balance. This is the kind of the paradox of HR practice, because we play so many different roles, and one of them is that activist role. So I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. So any final closing remarks from this group? Todd, I know you've, oh yeah, I see your hand, Todd. Right.
Yeah, I just want to say congratulations to Edafe. You were in my leadership class, and you were a quiet, humble leader. And I knew a little bit of your story, but until I read your whole book, I didn't know all of it. So just thanks for, you know, just being a leader and leading others. And if you ever want to guest speak in our class, you know, come, let me know, and we'll get you in the fall. We'd love for you to talk to the student. I'm wearing my SPS shirt today in your honor. But it's great to see Anna and Marianne and Michael and Solange and everyone. So thanks for bringing us together. So it's great to always see your smiling face, Edafe, and congrats on all your amazing work.
I didn't know that you were 6.6 feet tall until my
6'4". I don't want to take extra credit.
Until my graduation day. So somebody I took capstone with, Eric, we were sitting together, me, Eric, and Rabia. So we're arguing about you. Eric was like, have you met Todd in person? I was like, no. He was like, it's taller than me. I was like, no, I see Todd on the Zoom screen. It's shorter than that. So we're arguing back and forth. So it was really interesting on our graduation day. That was the argument we were arguing.
One of the things I always say on Zoom, we're all the same height. So it's the great leveler.
Yeah, exactly. A great equalizer here. Yes. Exactly. All right. Any other comments? Solange, was Edafe in your class as well?
Yeah.
Yes, he was. And he was a very engaged and intellectually curious student. So thank you for that. And I did not know very much about your background. So I'm humbled by your story, and I'm inspired by your resiliency. So it's a story that we all have to hear. As a child of immigrants, my parents immigrated 5 times. They were not refugees, but they waited for 8 years outside of the United States to get permission to come here. I know firsthand the story of how difficult it is to immigrate. And I, give you, my mother said the hardest immigration she ever made was to the United States. It is a very hard place to come and become part of the fabric of this country. And then on the other hand, my editorial comment is the fabric of this country is not so nice anymore. Maybe you don't want to become part of its fabric.
Yeah. No, but at the same time, I think that the people who are fighting most, I've read some of the comments that Edafe made on LinkedIn around the current events and, where kind of the direction in which this country is going at the moment. And I think that his voice is very powerful and that's the side of this country and the hope that this society provided to the entire world is just being smashed, you know, within the most incredible, you know. I was in Argentina. I was in Argentina when I got the news, and I got so many questions from Argentinians who just got their right in 2020, and they fought so hard, as well as the Mexicans, you know, and to hear the news coming out of this country is going to create I mean, it's just irreparable change around the world.
And it's SCOTUS and POTUS, right? And it's not just what the Supreme Court is doing, but it's the erosion of trust in our institutions. And, you know, if the Justice Department doesn't do something, then the three branches have no meaning anymore. And I think that immigrants understand the delicacy, the delicate nature, not that it's delicious, the delicate nature of democracy more than Americans do, who take it for granted. We wake up every morning and here it is.
Yeah.
So thank you to the immigrants that, you know, have helped shape the narrative in this country. They need to have their voices heard more.
Right. And that's what I think. Yeah, go ahead.
The day January 6th happened, we were taking a class together. The next morning, that evening, we had a class together, JTEM. And you asked us.
That was my class. Yeah.
And you asked us to take a break for the day because it was too emotionally overbearing. I'm just thinking about it, like few years after it has happened, a lot of people are trying to forget that. But I just want to say this, that I'm very grateful because today is the last event for this book tour I did. I'm very grateful, like I came back home to this place and so many of you have really impacted my life. I've been in the process of like doing some very important work I enjoy. I still go to my NYU email. I go to the drive. Then I look at the presentation I do for a particular class. Then I take that presentation and I download it on my laptop and I'll be preparing to the meeting. So one of the stuff I did was designing a platform for Afghans to register. So I was using the design thinking slide I did for my very final class in NYU. So I was just reading the ideate, prototype and test. I was like, yes. So when I went into the place they were talking, I was like, I have something to contribute in this space. So, you know, it could look sometimes like it doesn't make an impact in somebody's life, just 6 weeks or 12 weeks of lecture, but it really does make an impact. And I think the metrics for education should not be employment. It should be something else, but I don't know what it is, so I cannot redefine it right now. I'll leave it at that, but thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you guys.
Okay, thank you so much, Edafe. You are always going to be with us. You know, there's such a status called Alumnus. So that's who you are. And, you know, we will be in touch. I mean, we're all going to be reading your book, and next time you're going to sign it in person. Yep. All right. So this concludes our series. We're going to get started again in September. And I'm just looking forward to continuing to do our mission. All the faculty here and the alumni, our Lisa, she left a little earlier. And, you know, Edafe, thank you so much. Okay,
thank you, Anna. It was a great series. Thank you for running that.
Thank you. We'll do it again, Marianne. We'll do it again. Thank you.
We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a great summer. Great to see everyone.
Have a great summer.